We don't treat without insurance. Next! The words cut through the crowded emergency room like a knife. The receptionist nurse didn't even look up from her computer as she said it, her tone sharp, final. A hush fell around the front desk. A young black mother stood frozen, her hand gripping the shoulder of her little boy. He couldn't have been more than 8. His small chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath a struggle. Sweat clung to his forehead, his face pale beneath his dark skin. He coughed violently, clinging to his mother's arm. "Please," the woman said, her voice breaking. "He has a fever, he can't breathe. I don't care about the paperwork right now. He needs help." The nurse finally glanced up, her expression cold, impatient. She leaned back in her chair and raised her voice loud enough for the entire waiting room to hear. "Ma'am, everyone thinks their case is urgent. You want care? Bring an insurance card. Otherwise, take him to a free clinic." She gestured dismissively toward the sliding doors. "Don't block the line." Gasps and whispers rippled through the waiting area. A man in a business suit shook his head, muttering, "Always the same excuse." A woman whispered to her daughter, "Don't stare, honey." The child coughed again, his small body trembling. His mother knelt beside him, pulling him close, her voice urgent. "Hold on, baby. Just hold on." Then she looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, he can't breathe. Someone help us." The nurse smirked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, now it's life or death. You people always know how to put on a show." A young resident passing through stopped briefly, her eyes darting to the boy. For a split second, concern flickered in her gaze. But when the receptionist glanced at her with a warning glare, she lowered her head and walked on. A teenager sitting near the vending machine pulled out his phone, angling it toward the scene. The red recording light blinked. He whispered to his friend, "This is crazy. Watch this go viral." The mother straightened, her face flushed with fury and desperation. "He's not faking. He's sick. Look at him." She tried to steady her son, but his breathing came in shallow gasps, his eyes glossy with fever. The nurse shrugged. "Ma'am, if he was really that sick, he wouldn't be standing here. He'd be in an ambulance. Don't waste our time." From behind the counter, a doctor appeared, drawn by the commotion. He looked over the boy briefly, barely pausing before shaking his head. Mild fever. Maybe a cough. Definitely not an emergency. His voice was clipped, clinical, dismissive. The boy let out a weak whimper, clutching his chest. The mother's face crumpled. "How can you say that? Can't you see?" But the doctor was already waving her off. "We have real patients to treat. Move along." The crowd in the waiting room shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others smirked. The teenager's phone caught everything: the nurse's mocking tone, the doctor's cold words, the child's trembling body. Finally, 2 orderlies stepped forward. "Ma'am, if you don't leave, we'll have to escort you out." The mother clutched her son, pressing his head against her chest. Her voice was low but steady now, no longer pleading. "One day, you'll regret this. You'll regret every word." The sliding doors opened with a hiss as she carried him out into the harsh daylight. The nurse leaned back in her chair, smirking, as the doctor muttered something under his breath and walked away. The waiting room buzzed again with conversation, the moment already fading for them. But for the boy and his mother, it had only just begun. The automatic doors closed behind the mother and her child, but the tension in the waiting room lingered like smoke after a fire. Some patients shook their heads. Others whispered, leaning toward each other with smirks that carried judgment disguised as amusement. "They always try it," a man in a pressed suit muttered, flipping through his phone. A woman beside him nodded. "Yeah, claim it's an emergency, then expect everyone else to pay." The teenage boy with the phone replayed the clip he had captured, chuckling to his friend. "Man, this is gold," she said. "One day you'll regret this," like she's in some movie. They both laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. But outside the sliding glass doors, Just visible through the glass, the mother had sunk to her knees beside her son. The boy was sitting on the curb, his breathing ragged, sweat dripping down his temple. She pressed a damp cloth from her purse against his forehead, whispering words of comfort no one inside could hear. The people in the waiting room shifted their attention back to their own problems. A toddler fussed in her stroller, an old man coughed harshly, a young woman tapped nervously at her paperwork. Life inside moved on, as though the scene at the front desk hadn't happened at all. Back at the reception counter, the nurse leaned toward another staffer, her voice low but not low enough. "She'll take him to county. Let them deal with it, not our problem." The staffer chuckled. "County's overflowing as it is." The nurse smirked. "Better them than us. Can't save everyone, especially not people who can't even take care of themselves." Behind them, the young resident who had hesitated earlier sat quietly, her clipboard clutched against her chest. She tried to focus on her notes, but the image of the boy's glassy eyes wouldn't leave her mind. His shallow breaths, the way he clutched his mother's hand. She had seen those signs before in pediatrics rotation. It hadn't looked fake. It had looked real. But she said nothing. The hierarchy was clear here. To speak out meant being labelled naive, soft, weak. She pressed her lips together and returned to scribbling notes that suddenly felt meaningless. Minutes ticked by. The sliding doors hissed open again and again as new patients came in, but no one mentioned the boy or his mother. They had already been erased. Then, the teenager with the phone uploaded his clip to social media. The caption read, "Black mom tries to scam ER, gets roasted faker." He leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Across town, the first notifications began to ping. A handful of likes. A laughing face emoji. Comments trickled in, some mocking, some uncertain. But in the waiting room, the mood lightened again. The doctor who had dismissed the boy passed through with a coffee cup in hand. "Any real emergencies yet?" he asked dryly. The nurse laughed, shaking her head. They laughed together, and the sound was bitter. Outside, through the glass doors, the mother finally stood again, lifting her son into her arms. His head rested heavily against her shoulder, his breaths shallow and uneven. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "Hold on, baby. Just hold on." The automatic doors slid shut behind her as she walked toward the parking lot, her figure swallowed by the daylight. No one inside followed. No one inside cared. But someone soon would. The staff lounge smelled of burnt coffee and disinfectant. A few nurses huddled around the counter, unwrapping snacks, their voices light, joking. The doctor leaned against the wall with his cup, still smiling from the earlier scene. "You should have seen her face," he said, his tone dripping with amusement. "Like I was supposed to drop everything and roll out a red carpet. All that drama over a runny nose." The receptionist nurse laughed loudly, shaking her head. "And did you see the way she tried to act desperate? Hugging him like he was about to keel over? Please, if it was that bad, they'd have come by ambulance." One orderly smirked. "They always pull the same stunt. Claim it's life or death, but the kid's walking and talking. Total faker." The doctor chuckled, sipping his coffee. "I told her straight mild fever, nothing more. We've got real emergencies to deal with. If they can't afford basic care, that's not my problem." The group laughed again, the sound sharp, dismissive, echoing against the sterile walls. But at the edge of the room, the young resident sat silently, her pen tapping nervously against her notebook. She had seen the boy's face up close, the way his breathing strained, the fever burning in his eyes. She wanted to speak up, to challenge them. But the hierarchy was suffocating. One wrong word, and her reputation as too emotional would stick forever. She kept her head down, though her stomach churned. Meanwhile, across town, in a modest apartment, the boy lay curled on the couch beneath a blanket. His skin glistened with sweat, his tiny body trembling with each cough. His mother knelt beside him, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead, whispering softly, "It's going to be okay, sweetheart. Just breathe with me." She counted quietly, inhaling and exhaling, trying to guide him through the shallow gasps. The boy whimpered, his voice weak. "Mom, it hurts." Her chest tightened at his words. She brushed his hair back gently, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "I know, baby. I know." The coffee table was littered with half-empty medicine bottles, thermometers, damp towels. She had tried everything at home, but it wasn't enough. She thought about the nurse's voice, the doctor's mocking smirk. Go somewhere else. Somewhere else. But where? She had called 3 other clinics already, and each one had the same answer. No insurance, no appointment, no help. Her phone buzzed. A message from a friend. "Is this your son?" Attached was the video from the hospital, already spreading. Her stomach dropped as she pressed play. There they were, her boy clinging to her, coughing, her own pleading voice, the nurse's smirk, the doctor's sneer, the orderlies escorting them out like intruders. The caption, "Black mom tries to scam ER, gets roasted faker." Her hands trembled. Her son's suffering had become a joke for strangers. She clutched him tighter, whispering fiercely, "You are not a joke. You are my whole world, and they will pay for this." Back at the hospital, the doctor's laughter rang out again. "Mark my words," he told the group. "By tomorrow, nobody will even remember them." But outside the lounge, in the waiting room, the teenager's phone buzzed non-stop. The video had already been shared hundreds of times, the comment section splitting open. Some laughed, some mocked, but others wrote words that burned with anger. "This isn't funny. That boy looks sick. Healthcare is not a privilege. If he dies, that hospital has blood on its hands." The storm was beginning, and the doctor, so smug in his certainty, had no idea how wrong he was. The front door opened with a quiet click. Heavy footsteps crossed the hardwood floor, pausing in the living room where the mother knelt beside their son. The boy lay curled on the couch, sweat beading on his forehead, his breathing shallow and uneven. The father set down his briefcase, his face tightening the moment he saw his child. He moved quickly to the couch, crouching low, pressing a hand to the boy's forehead. The heat radiating from his skin made his stomach drop. "My God," he whispered, "he's burning up." The boy blinked weakly, his eyes struggling to focus. "Dad." His voice was little more than a rasp. "I'm here," the father said quickly, brushing damp hair from his son's face. "I've got you. Just hold on." He shot a sharp glance at his wife. "What happened? Why isn't he in a hospital bed right now?" Her lips trembled. She explained in halting words. The insurance demand, the nurse's sarcasm, the doctor's dismissive laugh, the orderlies escorting them out like trespassers. By the time she finished, her husband's hands were clenched into fists. "They turned him away?" His voice was low, dangerous, simmering with restrained fury. "They looked at him at my son and called him a faker?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. "I begged them. They didn't care." He rose slowly, pacing across the room, his shoulders tight, every step measured. On the coffee table, the phone buzzed again with another notification. The same video replayed. Their humiliation, now entertainment for strangers online. He picked up the phone, his jaw tightening as he watched. The clip ended with his wife's final words, captured clearly. "One day, you'll regret this." He set the phone down carefully, as though it might shatter under the force of his grip. "She was right," he said softly. Then louder, with steel in his voice, "They will regret this." His wife looked at him, fear and hope mingling in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" He didn't answer right away. He crossed to the corner of the room where his briefcase sat. Flipping it open, he pulled out a folder filled with contracts, reports, financial documents. At the top of one page, stamped in bold letters, was the name of the hospital. Below it, funding agreement. He slid the paper back into the folder before his wife could see. "Tomorrow," he said firmly, "they'll learn exactly who they turned away." She blinked, uncertain. "What do you mean?" He leaned down, kissing his son gently on the forehead. For now, all that matters is that he rests. But tomorrow, we stop being silent." The boy coughed weakly, his small body trembling. The father held him close for a long moment, his face carved in stone, eyes dark with a fury that promised consequences. Outside, the city lights flickered across the skyline. Inside, the storm that would shake the hospital had just found its voice. By midnight, the video had spread far beyond the teenager's phone. It bounced from one social platform to another, hashtags multiplying like wildfire. Faker boy, ER discrimination, justice for patients. The clip was short, but damning. The receptionist nurse's dismissive tone, the doctor's sneer, the boy coughing weakly in the background, the mother's trembling voice. "One day, you'll regret this." At first, the comments leaned toward mockery. Classic scam. Good on that hospital for shutting it down. Kid looks fine to me. Overreacting mom. Hoodie plus no insurance faker every time. But by dawn, the tide began to turn. New viewers noticed what the others had ignored. The boy's glassy eyes, his shallow breathing, the desperation in his mother's voice. The comments shifted. "Wait, that child is clearly sick. This isn't funny. This is neglect. If he dies, that hospital has blood on its hands." Across the city, people scrolled their feeds, uneasy. What had seemed like a funny moment was unraveling into something darker. Meanwhile, in the hospital break room, the staff crowded around a phone, laughter spilling over the hum of vending machines. "Look at her face," the receptionist nurse cackled, pointing at the screen, like she thought crying would change anything. The doctor smirked, sipping his coffee. "This is what happens when people think they can guilt us into free care. I'm glad someone caught it on camera. Shows we don't take nonsense." A few nurses chuckled, though one frowned at the comments section. You might want to read these. Not everyone's laughing." The doctor waved a dismissive hand. "People complain about everything online. By next week, they'll forget this even happened." The receptionist leaned back in her chair, smug. "If anything, this proves we were right. No one serious comes in without insurance. They were just wasting our time." The young resident sat quietly in the corner, her notebook open but untouched. She scrolled the video on her own phone, her lips pressed tight. The boy's weak cough echoed in her memory, louder now than any of their laughter. At the same time, in the family's apartment, the mother sat awake, her son asleep on her lap. She scrolled through the same comments, her chest heavy with rage. Each mocking emoji cut deeper. Each word of doubt made her want to scream. But then she saw the new comments, the ones calling out the injustice, demanding accountability. Her eyes welled with tears, not of despair this time, but of something harder, resolve. People were starting to see the truth. In the bedroom, her husband spoke quietly into his phone. His tone was calm but firm, the voice of a man used to commanding boardrooms. "Yes, confirm tomorrow's meeting. No, don't cancel a thing. In fact, make sure the press is aware. They need to hear this story." He hung up and stood at the doorway, watching his wife cradle their son. His jaw tightened. Tomorrow, the world would see not only the boy's suffering, but the arrogance of the hospital that had turned him away. At sunrise, the video had passed 1 million views. News anchors began discussing it live, replaying the clip alongside headlines like "ER denies black childcare, caught on camera." And inside the hospital, the staff still laughed, unaware that the world outside was already sharpening its gaze. Morning light spilled across the apartment, washing over the family like a fragile promise. The boy still lay on the couch, his breaths shallow, his forehead damp with fever. His mother sat beside him, stroking his hair gently, whispering lullabies under her breath. In the kitchen, the father stood at the counter, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and controlled. "No, don't cancel the meeting," he said sharply. "In fact, move it earlier. The board needs to hear this before the press does." He paused, listening, his jaw tightening. "Yes, I'm aware of the video. That's why this is urgent. Make sure the hospital's representatives are present. They'll understand why soon enough. He ended the call and set the phone down slowly, his hand lingering on the marble countertop. His face was calm, almost too calm, but in his eyes burned a fury barely contained. On the table sat a folder thick with documents. He opened it, scanning familiar lines of contracts and agreements. At the top of the stack was a letter bearing the hospital's official seal. The words across the header read, "Acknowledgement of donation." His name was at the bottom, signed in bold ink. He stared at it for a long moment before sliding the paper back into the folder. From the living room, his wife's voice called softly, "He's awake." He stepped back into the room, crouching beside his son. The boy's eyes fluttered open, weak but searching. The father forced a smile. "Hey, champ, you're strong. You'll get through this." The boy coughed, whispering, "Why didn't they help me, Dad?" The words pierced him deeper than any wound. He swallowed hard before answering, his voice steady but heavy. "Because they couldn't see who you really are, but soon they'll know." His wife looked at him, worry etched across her face. "What are you planning?" He met her eyes, his voice low, steady. "I'm not planning revenge. I'm planning truth. They thought we were invisible. Tomorrow, they'll see us clearer than they ever imagined." She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "Promise me this won't be just about anger. Promise me it will help others too." He nodded slowly. "It will. This is bigger than us now." Elsewhere, in the hospital cafeteria, staff laughed over morning coffee. The nurse scrolled through her phone, smirking at the video's comment section. "It's going viral. Look, thousands of people laughing. We were right." The doctor sat back smugly. "Good. Let the world see. Maybe people will think twice before wasting our time." But not everyone was laughing. The young resident read the comments silently. She focused on the ones that struck hardest. "That boy looks seriously ill. If something happens to him, this is on that hospital. This isn't just a mistake. It's discrimination." Her stomach twisted. She glanced at her colleagues, their laughter grating in her ears. For the first time, she wondered if she was in the wrong place. Back at the apartment, the father closed his laptop after sending a final email. He looked at his son, sleeping now, his small hand curled into his mother's. "They think we're powerless," he whispered, almost to himself. "Tomorrow, they'll learn where the power really lies." The city outside hummed with life, oblivious. But inside that quiet apartment, the first moves of a reckoning had already begun. By mid-morning, the video had climbed past 2 million views. What had begun as a cruel joke was transforming into something much bigger. The caption, "Black Mom Tries to Scam ER," was no longer met with laughter alone. Underneath the flood of laughing emojis came waves of new comments. "This child looks really sick. Why didn't they help him? Healthcare is supposed to be for everyone." Imagine refusing a kid gasping for air. This isn't just negligence. This is racism. The tone online shifted from mockery to fury. Outrage grew louder with every refresh. Hashtags trended globally. Air neglect, racism in healthcare, justice for the child. Clips spread to morning talk shows. News anchors replayed the video in grim silence, then shook their heads with visible disgust. "A boy denied treatment," one anchor said, his voice heavy. "We don't yet know his condition today. But what we do know is that a hospital failed a child in need." Outside the hospital, the first wave of reporters arrived. Microphones in hand, cameras rolling, they crowded near the sliding glass doors, firing questions at staff as they entered. "Is it true you refused care to a child? Has the family been contacted? Do you believe racial bias was a factor?" Nurses and doctors ducked their heads, pushing through the crowd, their laughter from earlier gone, replaced by tight-lipped silence. Inside, the cafeteria chatter had died down. Staff scrolled their phones nervously, the video now unavoidable on every feed. The receptionist nurse frowned, her smugness faltering. "Why are people so angry? They don't understand what it's like in triage. The doctor clenched his jaw, defensive. This is blown out of proportion. He wasn't critical. I made a professional judgment. But a younger nurse whispered, if he was critical and we were wrong, the whole world just watched us turn him away. The resident sat apart, her notebook open, words scribbled in the margins. He wasn't lying. He was sick. We failed him. In the family's apartment, the mother sat on the couch, her son still curled against her. The boy stirred weakly, murmuring, "Mom, I don't feel good." "I know, baby," she whispered, holding him tighter. "We'll get you help." Her phone buzzed again. Messages poured in. Friends forwarding the video, strangers offering prayers, journalists requesting interviews. She turned to her husband, panic in her eyes. "It's everywhere. Everyone is watching us." He stood at the window, staring out at the city, his silhouette framed against the morning sun. "Good," he said calmly. "Let them watch. The truth works best when the world is looking." He picked up his phone, dialing a number. His voice was low, steady, purposeful. "Yes, I'll be attending the hospital board meeting tomorrow." "No, don't reschedule. I want every administrator in the room. And make sure the press knows where to be." When he hung up, his wife stared at him, realization dawning, but still incomplete. "What are you planning?" He looked at her, his eyes burning with quiet fire. "Justice. Not just for our son, for everyone who's ever been turned away." At the hospital entrance, a reporter's voice carried clearly above the noise. This story is no longer about one family. It's about a system. And unless this hospital responds quickly, the consequences will be devastating. The sliding glass doors closed behind another nervous doctor. Inside, the air felt heavier, every laugh from yesterday now ringing like a curse. The reckoning was coming. By late morning, the story had exploded. Cable news channels ran the clip on repeat, splitting the screen between the boy's pained coughs and the hospital's logo gleaming coldly above its glass doors. Analysts debated whether this was a tragic misunderstanding or something darker. Most agreed. It looked indefensible. But then, another piece of the puzzle emerged. On one major network, the anchor leaned forward, voice heavy with new weight. "We're just receiving word that the boy in this video is the son of a prominent business leader. Sources say his father runs a company that is, in fact, one of this hospital's largest donors." The screen shifted to a stock photo of the father from a past business summit. He stood at a podium in a tailored suit, shaking hands with global executives. His name appeared in bold letters beneath the image. For a moment, the anchor paused, as though letting the gravity settle. If true, this means the hospital not only denied care to a child in need, but to the child of the very man funding much of its operations. The revelation rippled across the internet instantly. Comments poured in. They refused treatment to his son? This hospital is finished. So the donor keeps their lights on and they treated his family like garbage? This is going to blow up even more. Inside the hospital, chaos brewed. Administrators stormed through hallways, whispering frantically. Phones rang off the hook. Lawyers were summoned. In the break room, the receptionist nurse scrolled her phone, her face pale. This can't be real. That was his son? The doctor cursed under his breath, his smug confidence cracking. No, impossible. He was just some woman off the street. He didn't say who he was. A younger nurse snapped, her voice trembling with anger. He shouldn't have to say who he was. He was a sick kid. That's all that should have mattered. The room fell into tense silence. For the first time, the laughter was gone. At home, the father sat at the dining table, his laptop open, emails flooding in from journalists and board members alike. His assistant's message blinked on the screen. Media caught wind of your connection. It's everywhere now. Press demanding a statement. He leaned back in his chair, his son's soft breathing audible from the couch. His wife watched him with wide eyes. They know, don't they? They know who you are. He nodded slowly, exhaling through his nose. Good. Now they'll understand why silence isn't an option anymore. His wife bit her lip. And what will it cost us? He looked at her steadily, his expression unyielding. More than money. This is about dignity, about truth. They wanted to treat us like we were invisible. Now they'll see us everywhere. At the hospital entrance, reporters shouted louder than ever, jostling for space. Microphones stretched forward, flashes strobed the glass doors. Is it true the boy's father is his name? How can the hospital justify refusing the son of its biggest donor? Will the staff responsible be fired? Inside, the administrators scrambled, but the truth was already beyond their control. The father's identity had entered the story, and with it, the hospital's downfall had truly begun. The hospital administrator's office was in chaos. Phones rang off the hook, voices overlapped in panic, and the hum of reporters outside grew louder by the hour. On the administrator's desk lay a copy of the Daily Ledger, the headline in bold black letters: Hospital refuses care to donor's son. The article beneath spared no mercy. The boy denied care in the viral video is the son of his name, CEO of company, the hospital's largest benefactor and financial lifeline. Sources confirm his company donated over $50 million in the past decade, funding entire wings of the facility now at the center of public outrage. The administrator slammed the paper shut, glaring at the staff gathered in front of her. The doctor shifted uneasily, arms crossed, while the receptionist nurse fidgeted, her face pale. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" the administrator hissed. "We didn't just humiliate a patient. We humiliated the family that built half this hospital." The nurse stammered. "I didn't know." "You didn't need to know," the administrator snapped. "He was a child gasping for air, and you mocked him." The doctor's jaw clenched. "I made a clinical judgment. He didn't look critical." Her eyes blazed. "A clinical judgment? You dismissed him without even listening to his chest. Do you understand what happens if that boy had collapsed outside? If he had died?" The room fell silent, the weight of her words choking the air. Finally, another nurse muttered from the corner, her voice trembling. "It's already happening. People online are saying we'd have blood on our hands." The receptionist's hands shook as she scrolled her phone. Comment after comment demanded her firing. Screenshots of her face from the video circulated with captions. "The face of cruelty." She pressed her palms to her eyes. "I didn't mean—" "No one cares what you meant." The administrator cut her off coldly. Elsewhere in the hospital, the young resident sat alone in the cafeteria, her notebook open. Around her, staff whispered frantically, blaming one another. Their camaraderie dissolved into fear. "It's the nurse's fault. She started it." "No, the doctor escalated it." They were both laughing. The resident wrote a single line in her notebook. "I was there. I said nothing." She underlined it twice, her chest tight. She knew silence had made her complicit. Outside, the media frenzy only intensified. Reporters shouted into cameras, their words carried live to millions of viewers. This hospital, once known for its charitable programs, now faces outrage as the world learns the boy they turned away is the son of their biggest donor. Protesters have already gathered outside, demanding accountability. Behind the reporters, signs bobbed in the air. Dignity for all patients, and healthcare is a right, not a privilege. The father's name trended globally. His face appeared alongside images of the hospital, the video replayed in endless loops. And everywhere, the question spread like wildfire. If this could happen to his son, what happens to the rest of us? Back in his apartment, the father watched the coverage silently, his expression unreadable. His wife sat beside him, their son asleep in her lap, still feverish but stable for now. She turned to him, her voice quiet but urgent. "They're falling apart, the whole hospital. You hold all the cards now." He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the screen. "Tomorrow," he said softly. "I won't need to raise my voice. The truth will speak for itself." The storm outside the hospital walls was growing into a hurricane, and by morning, no one inside would be safe from it. The crowd outside the hospital had doubled overnight. Reporters jostled against barricades, protesters waved signs, and cameras flashed endlessly. The air buzzed with tension, the hospital logo above the glass doors now a symbol of disgrace. Then the black sedan pulled up. The door opened, and the father stepped out. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. His presence was magnetic, commanding instant silence. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust in his direction. "Sir, do you have a statement? Is it true your son was denied treatment here? What do you say to the staff who called him a faker?" He didn't answer yet. Instead, he walked calmly through the parted crowd, his gaze fixed on the glass doors ahead. Behind him, cameras rolled, capturing every step. Inside the lobby, the staff froze. The receptionist nurse paled at the sight of him, her hands trembling on the desk. The doctor, summoned hastily by administrators, stood rigid, sweat beading at his temples. The young resident lingered in the background, her notebook clutched tightly, her face conflicted. The sliding doors opened with a soft hiss. He entered, the hum of whispers following him like a shadow. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. He stopped at the reception desk, placing both hands on the counter, the same spot where his wife had begged for mercy, where his son had coughed and been dismissed. His voice was low, steady, and carried across the entire lobby. "Yesterday, I came here as a father, asking for help for my son. You refused him. You mocked him. You sent him away." The nurse's lips parted, her voice trembling. We didn't know who you were." His eyes locked on hers, sharp as steel. "You didn't need to know. All you needed to know was that he was a child in pain, and that should have been enough." A murmur rippled through the lobby. Reporters leaned closer, cameras zooming in. The doctor cleared his throat, forcing a defensive tone. "Sir, with respect, you didn't present insurance. We had protocols." "Protocols?" the father snapped, his voice rising now. "Protocols don't excuse cruelty. Protocols don't excuse humiliation. You looked at a child's skin color, his clothes, his mother's fear, and you decided he wasn't worth your time." The doctor flinched, his jaw tightening. The nurse broke into sobs, her head dropping into her hands. The father straightened, turning slowly to face the cameras. His voice boomed with quiet authority. "This hospital thought my son was invisible, but today the world sees him. Today, the world sees what happens when arrogance replaces compassion, when prejudice replaces duty." The lobby erupted in flashes, the sound of shutters and gasps colliding. The protesters outside cheered, their chants vibrating through the glass doors. The father's final words cut through the chaos like a blade. "You tried to deny my child care. But what you denied yourselves was your honor as healers. And now you will answer to the people you swore to serve." He stepped back, his silence heavier than any threat. Behind him, the crowd outside roared louder, their voices echoing off the hospital walls. For the staff, there was no place to hide. The press hall was overflowing. Rows of reporters packed the seats, microphones lined the podium, and cameras crowded every angle. The atmosphere was electric, the weight of anticipation pressing down on everyone inside. At the center of it all stood the father. Gone was the quiet restraint of yesterday today. He stood tall, every movement precise, every word chosen like a weapon. Behind him, 2 large screens displayed the now infamous video. His wife pleading, the nurse's mocking smile, the doctor's sneer, his son coughing weakly. On the opposite screen, headlines blared his name. "CEO of hospital's biggest donor speaks out." He leaned into the microphone. The hall fell silent. "Yesterday, my son was sick. He couldn't breathe. His mother begged for help. And this hospital, the one my company has funded for years, turned him away. They called him a faker. They mocked his pain. They humiliated him in front of strangers." A murmur rippled across the room. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I didn't walk into that hospital as a CEO. I didn't walk in as a donor. I walked in as a father. And what I learned is that to them, that wasn't enough. They didn't see a child in need. They saw a stereotype. They saw skin color. They saw what they wanted to see. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed closer. "This is not just about my family," he continued, his voice steady but fiery. "This is about every family that has ever been dismissed, ignored, or humiliated because of prejudice. Every patient who walked in sick and was told they were lying. Every parent who begged for help and was denied because someone behind a desk decided their life wasn't worth the time." Applause broke out from the back of the hall. Protesters who had been allowed inside raised signs that read, "Healthcare for all," and "Dignity over discrimination." He raised his hand, quieting the room again. "I've been asked if I will withdraw my company's support for this hospital. The answer is simple. Yes. Not because I no longer believe in healthcare, but because I no longer believe in this hospital. Not until it proves it can serve every patient with humanity, not arrogance." Gasps rippled through the room. The hospital's financial lifeline had just been severed, live on national television. "But my fight does not end there," he added, his eyes sweeping the room. "I will dedicate my resources to building accountability, to making sure no child, no parent, no human being is ever dismissed again for the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, or the insurance card they don't have." The hall erupted into thunderous applause. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed like a storm, and his words spread instantly across every screen in the country. The father stepped back from the podium, his silhouette framed by the contrasting images on the screen. His son coughing in a hospital lobby, and his own face, resolute, powerful, unyielding. For the hospital staff watching from break rooms and offices, the message was unmistakable. The man they had dismissed as powerless had just become their judge, their jury, and the spark for something far larger than themselves. The hospital boardroom was suffocating with tension. Around the long mahogany table, administrators whispered furiously, stacks of papers scattered before them. On the large screen at the head of the room, live coverage of the father's press conference replayed. His words, calm, devastating, filled the space like a gavel striking down. The board chair, an older woman with silver hair, slammed her palm against the table. "We don't have the luxury of time. The public wants accountability, and they want it now." Her eyes darted to the doctor seated rigidly across from her. His face was pale, sweat clinging to his forehead. "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation," she said coldly. He pushed back in his chair, his voice rising. "I made a judgment call. This is being blown out of proportion. I've been here 20 years. 20 years of experience," she cut him off. "And you couldn't see that a child was in distress. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand who you humiliated?" The doctor's jaw tightened, but he fell silent. Next, her gaze fell on the receptionist nurse, who sat trembling, tears streaking her face. "And you? The video of your mockery has been seen by millions. You are hereby terminated. Security will escort you from the building." The nurse's sobs filled the room. "Please. It was a mistake. I didn't mean—" "No one cares what you meant," the chair snapped. "You broke the oath of compassion. You turned a child away." An uncomfortable silence hung in the air. In the corner, the young resident sat quietly, her notebook on her lap. The board chair's eyes softened slightly as she turned to her. "And you? You saw it. You did nothing. Why?" The resident's voice cracked, but she spoke with honesty. "Because I was afraid. Afraid of challenging authority. Afraid of being labeled weak. And I was wrong." She closed her notebook, her hands trembling. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I promise I will never be silent again." For a moment, the board chair studied her. Then she nodded curtly. "You'll remain under review. Your words will be noted." Outside, chaos continued. News vans lined the streets. Protesters filled the sidewalks, chanting, "Justice for the child! Justice for all!" Reporters swarmed the hospital entrances, thrusting microphones toward anyone in scrubs or a lab coat. Clips of the nurse crying as she was escorted out went viral within minutes. The doctor's name and photo spread across headlines with the word "suspended" in bold letters beside it. Patients too began speaking up. One woman came forward with her own story of being dismissed at the same hospital. Then another. Soon, a flood of testimonies poured into the media, painting a picture not of one bad day, but of a culture of neglect. Inside his apartment, the father watched it unfold on television, his expression unreadable. His wife sat beside him, her hand resting on their son's small shoulder. The boy stirred, whispering softly, "Dad, they're in trouble?" The father leaned down, kissing his son's forehead gently. "They're facing the truth. That's more powerful than trouble." His son smiled weakly, comforted, and drifted back to sleep. The father turned back to the screen. For the staff who had mocked his family, the reckoning had arrived. Their careers, once untouchable, were collapsing under the weight of their own arrogance. And this was only the beginning. What had started as a 30-second video was now a national reckoning. News networks across the country dedicated entire segments to the story. Talk show hosts debated it. Editorials filled newspapers. Hashtags like "Justice for the Child," "Healthcare for All," and "Bias in Medicine" trended daily. The image of the boy coughing in the waiting room played beside footage of protesters holding candles outside the hospital. Across the nation, rallies sparked in other cities, with people sharing their own stories of being dismissed in hospitals and clinics. "This isn't just about one child," one activist told a crowd in Chicago. "This is about every person who was ignored because of prejudice. About every life put at risk because someone decided they weren't worth listening to." The crowd roared in agreement. Meanwhile, in the father's office, the atmosphere was anything but quiet. Stacks of letters poured in from advocacy groups, civil rights organizations, and ordinary families. Stories of discrimination flooded his inbox. Children ignored, mothers dismissed, patients treated as less than human. He sat at his desk, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. Across from him, his advisors debated furiously. "We can file lawsuits against the hospital, hit them where it hurts. Or we use this moment for something bigger: policy reform, accountability systems. The country is watching. If we move now, we can change everything." The father listened in silence, his hands steepled beneath his chin. Finally, he spoke. "This is no longer about my son alone. This is about every son and daughter who walked into a hospital and left unseen. If we limit this to punishment, we waste the moment. If we push for reform, we change lives." His advisors exchanged glances, nodding. He continued, his voice calm but resolute. "We will establish a foundation, an independent body to track discrimination in healthcare. We will lobby for laws requiring mandatory bias training, and we will fund clinics in underserved communities so no parent ever has to beg for their child to be believed." At the same time, the hospital continued to unravel. With its donor funds withdrawn, stockpiles dwindled. Sponsors distanced themselves. Patients cancelled appointments, turning instead to clinics run by rival institutions. The once smug doctor, now suspended, faced an investigation that threatened his license. The receptionist nurse, jobless and disgraced, was hounded online, her face a symbol of cruelty in countless memes. And the young resident, racked with guilt, gave a tearful interview, admitting she had seen the truth but been too afraid to speak. Her confession only fueled the fire. On television, the father appeared again, this time not with anger, but with vision. Sitting across from an anchor, he spoke steadily. "My family's story is just one." But it revealed what many already knew: that prejudice kills. I intend to make sure no family endures what mine did. This is not vengeance. This is responsibility. The anchor leaned forward. "Do you think change is possible?" The father's eyes glinted with quiet fire. "It has to be. Because if healthcare isn't equal, then it isn't healthcare at all. Across the country, viewers watched, and for the first time, they didn't just see a powerful CEO. They saw a father who refused to let injustice stand, and a leader determined to rebuild what arrogance had broken. The movement had begun. Weeks passed, but the outrage did not fade. If anything, it grew. The hospital that had once stood as a beacon of prestige now found itself branded a symbol of failure. Its name was spoken on nightly news, not with respect, but with scorn. Patients cancelled appointments in droves. Donations dried up. Government agencies launched investigations. Every hallway felt heavier, quieter, as if the building itself carried shame. The doctor, once so confident in his authority, now sat in hearings with his head bowed. The medical board interrogated him with sharp questions. Why didn't you examine the child? Do you understand how your words contributed to systemic harm? Each answer dug him deeper into disgrace. His license hung by a thread. The receptionist nurse, fired and disgraced, found herself unable to get rehired. Clips of her laughter resurfaced any time she applied for work. Neighbours whispered. Strangers hurled insults in grocery stores. She was no longer anonymous. She was the face of cruelty, frozen forever in a viral video. The young resident, however, chose a different path. In a heartfelt televised interview, she confessed her silence. I should have spoken up. I didn't. And I'll live with that. But I promise I'll never be silent again. Her vulnerability struck a chord, and while she carried guilt, she also became a voice for young medical professionals who wanted to change the culture. Meanwhile, the Father's Foundation took shape with startling speed. Offices opened in major cities, staffed by advocates, lawyers, and doctors determined to confront discrimination in healthcare. A hotline was established for patients who had been ignored or mistreated. Within weeks, thousands of calls poured in. The Foundation's first public report was damning. Data collected from across the country revealed patterns of bias long buried under bureaucracy. Hospitals that prided themselves on efficiency were exposed for turning away the vulnerable. Clinics once hailed as accessible were revealed to be riddled with prejudice. The father didn't just release the report, he delivered it himself in front of Congress. His calm voice echoed in the chamber. This isn't just numbers. These are lives, and they deserve better. His words carried weight not because of his wealth, but because of his truth. Lawmakers leaned forward, activists applauded, and families across the nation felt seen. At home, life remained quieter, gentler. The boy, now stronger, played with his toys on the living room rug, his laughter filling the space. His mother watched with tears in her eyes, still remembering the night she thought she might lose him. The father stood by the window, watching his son with a softened expression. He whispered almost to himself, "You were their lesson, and now you'll be their change." For him, the movement wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding a system so no parent, no child, no family would ever again be told they were invisible. The hospital had lost its honor. The staff who mocked had lost their careers. But from that loss, a fire had been lit, and it was spreading across the nation. The city skyline shimmered under the setting sun, golden light washing over the buildings as if erasing shadows. In the family's apartment, the atmosphere felt lighter than it had in weeks. The boy sat at the kitchen table, a plate of food in front of him, giggling at a joke his mother told. His cheeks were no longer pale, his breathing steady. The fever was gone, and with it, the heavy fear that had haunted the home. The father watched from the doorway, his heart swelling. For all the battles waged in boardrooms, press halls, and courts, this moment, the sound of his son's laughter was victory enough. Later that evening, he sat with his wife on the balcony. Below them, the city pulsed with life, headlights streaking like veins of light across the streets. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice soft. "Do you think it's really changing?" He exhaled, considering. Yes, Change doesn't happen in a day, but the spark is lit. Hospitals are reviewing policies. Lawmakers are listening. People are speaking up. They can't go back to pretending anymore. She smiled faintly. And our son, he'll grow up knowing his voice matters. The father's gaze drifted to the horizon. He'll grow up knowing silence is never the answer. That dignity isn't granted, it's defended. Across town, the once proud hospital stood like a scar. Protest banners still clung to its fences. The administrator resigned under pressure, citing personal reasons. The doctor faced the end of his license. The receptionist nurse disappeared from the profession entirely. Their names had become cautionary tales in training seminars about ethics and compassion. But elsewhere, hope was rising. The Father's Foundation announced its first grants to support community clinics. Medical schools requested his involvement in developing new training programs on bias and equity. Parents who had once felt powerless now had a place to turn. News anchors no longer spoke only of scandal. They spoke of reform. They spoke of a movement. They spoke of the child who had been denied care and the father who refused to let that moment define the end of the story. Back in the apartment, the boy carried a book to his father, climbing onto his lap. "Read to me," he said, his small voice steady and sure. The father smiled, wrapping an arm around him, opening the book. As he read, his voice softened, carrying warmth into the night. His wife watched them, her eyes glistening not with sorrow now, but with pride. The camera of imagination pulled back out of the apartment over the glowing city, past the hospital that had failed, toward the countless homes where families watched and felt less alone. The final frame faded to black. On screen, words appeared. They refused to treat him. But in refusing one child, they revealed the need to change for all. Justice is not revenge. It is healing. Silence followed. Then only the echo of a truth that could no longer be denied.